So I know this sounds absolutely insane, but I swear on everything, this actually happened. I've never told anyone about this before, not my friends, not my family, hell, not even my therapist. And honestly, I'm only putting it here because I can't keep it in anymore. I need to get this out of my head before it eats me alive. This started a couple of months ago when I went down one of those rabbit holes on the internet. You know, the kind where you're just bored and looking for something weird to pass the time. I'd heard about the dark web before, but I always thought it was just a bunch of urban legends. A place where people exaggerated the weird and illegal stuff you could supposedly find there. Drugs, hitmen, stolen credit cards, all that cliché crap. But what really caught my attention was this rumor about something called human replication services, like cloning, literal cloning. I wasn't looking for anything like that, but when you're scrolling through those sketchy forums, curiosity gets the best of you. I found a thread where people were talking about it like it was legit. One guy even posted a step-by-step guide on how to find the site. For curiosity's sake, I told myself. I wasn't actually going to buy anything. I mean, who the hell buys a clone, right? So I followed the instructions. Tor browser, VPN, all that anonymous browsing stuff. It felt like I was doing something straight out of a hacker movie. After a while, I found the site. It was called Genesis Proxy, which sounded like something straight out of a sci-fi film. The layout was basic, almost like one of those early 2000s websites, but the content, it was insane. The homepage was full of weird testimonials from people claiming they'd used the service. Some were saying they made clones of their dead relatives. Others claimed they'd cloned celebrities to, keep them company. It was gross and weird and messed up, but also kind of fascinating in the worst way possible. I was about to close the tab when I saw this line. Make a clone of yourself, perfect in every way. Same DNA, same memories, same consciousness, yours to control.
That stopped me. The idea of seeing myself like a perfect copy of me was disturbing, but also kind of tempting. I've always had this weird curiosity about how other people see me. What I look like when I'm not looking in a mirror. How I sound to other people. This felt like a messed up way to get those answers. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. The process to place an order was surprisingly simple. Too simple. I just had to upload a recent photo of myself, answer a few questions about my medical history, and submit a payment in Bitcoin. I hesitated at the payment screen. It was expensive, like stupidly expensive, but something about it felt so surreal, I couldn't stop myself. It felt like I was in some fever dream, detached from reality. I hit confirm before I could change my mind. The site told me I'd receive a delivery notification within 3 to 5 business days. Delivery? Like, what the hell was I expecting? A clone to show up in a FedEx box? I laughed it off and went about my day, convincing myself it was just some elaborate scam. But then, 2 days later, I got a text message, no sender ID, just a blank number. The message read, "Your package has been delivered. Please check your back door." My stomach dropped. I live alone in a pretty quiet neighborhood, so it's not like I was expecting anyone. I walked to the back door, my heart pounding in my chest, and there it was. A large black crate. It looked like one of those industrial shipping containers you'd see on a construction site, and it had no labels, just a small keypad on the side. At this point, I should have called the cops. I should have done anything other than what I actually did. But curiosity, stupid, blind curiosity, got the best of me. The text had a code at the bottom, so I punched it into the keypad. The crate unlocked with a hiss, like something out of a sci-fi horror movie. The front panel slid open, and inside was me.
I can't even explain what it felt like seeing myself for the first time. Not in a mirror, not in a photo, in person. It was sitting inside the crate, naked, curled up like he'd just been born. His eyes were open, and they locked onto mine immediately. It wasn't like looking at a stranger. It was like looking into my own soul. He blinked a couple of times, then tilted his head, almost like he was confused. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was my voice. Exactly the same, but off, like hearing a recording of yourself and realizing you don't sound the way you thought you did. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. My brain was stuck in this loop of, this can't be real, this can't be real, this can't be real. Then he stood up. I hadn't really processed how disturbing it was until that moment. His movements were stiff and jerky, like he didn't quite know how to use his body yet. He stumbled forward, and I instinctively backed away. That's when I noticed something was wrong. His skin, it wasn't right. It was too smooth, too shiny, almost like wax. There were no blemishes, no scars, not even pores. "Why do I feel weird?" he asked, looking down at his hands. He turned them over like he'd never seen fingers before. Then he looked at me again, and his face twisted into this expression I can only describe as hungry. "Are you me?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what the hell do you say to yourself when you're standing naked in your kitchen, asking existential questions? I stammered out something about needing to figure this out, but before I could finish, he lunged at me. That's when I realized this wasn't just some harmless experiment. This thing, this clone, it wasn't just me. It was something darker, something wrong. I tried to wrestle him off me, but he was strong, way stronger than I expected. His grip felt like iron, and his hands went straight for my throat. I managed to shove him off and ran to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I could hear him outside, scratching at the wood like a rabid animal.
"Let me in," he said. His voice sounded desperate now, but there was something else underneath it, something cold and emotionless. That was the moment I realized I wasn't in control of this situation anymore. This thing wasn't just a clone of me. It was something far worse. And now it was in my house. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I barricaded myself in my bedroom with a chair wedged under the doorknob and my dresser shoved against it for good measure. Every so often, I'd hear movement outside. Shuffling, footsteps, sometimes a weird scratching sound like nails on the walls. I tried to convince myself this was some kind of vivid nightmare, like maybe I'd been drugged or something. But deep down, I knew. This was real, and he was still out there. Around 4 a.m., the noises stopped. I didn't trust it at first, but the silence stretched on for hours. Eventually, sunlight started creeping through the cracks in my blackout curtains. That's when I finally worked up the courage to check. I moved the dresser as quietly as I could and cracked the door open, peeking out into the hallway. It was empty, but I could feel something was off. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? Like your instincts are screaming at you to turn around? That's exactly what it felt like. I tiptoed through the house, gripping a baseball bat I kept under my bed. The place was trashed, furniture overturned, pictures ripped off the walls, and the fridge was wide open, food scattered everywhere, but no sign of him. I checked every room, every closet, every corner, but it was like he'd just vanished. I should have called the cops right then, but what the hell was I supposed to say? "Hi, officer. I ordered a clone of myself from the dark web, and now it's trying to kill me?" They'd lock me in a psych ward before I could finish the sentence. So instead I did something even stupider. I cleaned up. It took hours to put the house back in order. The whole time, I couldn't shake this feeling of dread, like he was going to jump out at me any second. But he didn't. By the time I was done, I almost convinced myself he was gone for good. Maybe he'd left the house during the night and wandered off somewhere. Maybe he'd died. Honestly, I didn't care, as long as he was gone. I sat down on the couch and tried to collect my thoughts. That's when I noticed my laptop. It was open on the coffee table, which was weird because I never leave it like that. The screen was on, and there was a text document pulled up. It was empty, except for one line. "Why did you make me?" My stomach dropped. I slammed the laptop shut and started pacing. This was bad, really bad. I didn't know what kind of sick game this thing was playing, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I grabbed my phone and started Googling local hotels, thinking I'd crash somewhere else for the night. That's when I saw it, the reflection in the TV. It was faint, just a shadow at first, but then it moved. I spun around, heart pounding, and there he was, standing at the end of the hallway, half hidden in the shadows. His head was tilted, and his eyes, God, his eyes. They didn't look human anymore. The pupils were too big, and the whites were starting to turn this sickly yellow color. He wasn't wearing clothes. His skin looked worse than before, patchy and cracked, like dried clay. "I was looking for you," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I froze. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He took a step forward, and that's when I noticed the knife in his hand, one of my kitchen knives. "You left me alone," he said, his tone shifting to something almost hurt. "I don't like being alone."
I finally snapped out of it and bolted for the front door. I didn't care that I was in my socks or that I didn't have my keys or wallet. I just needed to get out. But as soon as I reached the door, I felt a hand grab the back of my shirt and yank me backward. I hit the floor hard, knocking the wind out of me. He stood over me, his face inches from mine. Up close, I could see every detail, and it was horrifying. His skin wasn't just cracked, it was peeling, like chunks of it were flaking off, revealing this dark, raw flesh underneath. His breath smelled like rot. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but I don't want you to leave." Somehow I managed to kick him off and scramble to my feet. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a lamp, and smashed it over his head. He stumbled but didn't go down. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong with him. Normal people don't just shrug off a lamp to the skull. He lunged at me again, but I managed to dodge and run into the kitchen. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely open the drawer, but I finally grabbed another knife. This time I was ready. When he came at me, I slashed at his arm. It should have been enough to stop him. The blade went deep, and there was blood, if you can even call it that. It wasn't red. It was this thick, dark, almost black fluid that oozed out like tar. But he didn't even flinch. He just smiled, this twisted, unnatural grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You can't get rid of me," he said. "I'm you." I don't know how, but I managed to get him locked in the basement. It wasn't easy. He fought like an animal, clawing and biting the whole way. But once I got him down there, I slammed the door and shoved the heaviest piece of furniture I could find in front of it. He's still down there. I can hear him moving around, sometimes talking to himself, sometimes screaming. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what he is. All I know is that he's not just a clone. He's something else, something wrong, and I think he's getting stronger. It's been 3 days since I locked him in the basement. 3 days of hell. I thought maybe he'd starve or weaken, but if anything, he's getting louder, more aggressive. The banging hasn't stopped, constant pounding on the door, shaking the entire frame like he's trying to break through. Every so often he screams my name. Hearing it in my own voice is, I can't even describe it. It's not just unsettling, it's maddening. Like every word he says is slicing straight into my brain. The worst part? He doesn't just scream. Sometimes he whispers. Late at night, when the house is dead silent, I hear him calling to me. Soft, calm, almost pleading. "Let me out. We can fix this together. You're wasting away up there. You need me. You can't hide from yourself." I started sleeping with earbuds in, blasting white noise just to drown him out. It doesn't always work, though. Sometimes I wake up and swear I can still hear him, even with the earbuds. Like his voice is inside my head. I've been trying to figure out what the hell to do. I can't go to the cops. They'd never believe me. And even if they did, how would I explain this? Hi, I locked a clone of myself in my basement, and now it's trying to kill me. Yeah, that would go over well. I thought about just leaving, packing up and disappearing, but I couldn't shake the thought of what might happen if I did. Would he get out? Would he come after me? Or worse, would he start pretending to be me? That's when it hit me. The text file, the message he left on my laptop. "Why did you make me?" It wasn't just a question, it was a clue. He had my memories, my thoughts, everything that made me me. Which meant, maybe, I could figure out how to stop him by figuring out where he came from. I went back to the dark web. Getting back into Genesis Proxy was harder this time. The site had disappeared from the link I used before, but I managed to find a mirror address buried deep in a forum thread. When I finally got in, everything looked the same. Cheap layout, creepy testimonials, but there was a new section on the homepage called Disclaimers. I clicked on it, and my stomach turned as I read the list. Replications may exhibit unanticipated behavioral anomalies. Prolonged exposure to replication may result in psychological distress. Do not attempt to destroy replication. Severe consequences may result. The last line hit me like a punch to the gut. Replication is not a perfect copy. It is an interpretation. An interpretation? What the hell did that mean? Was he not really me? Just some twisted version of me? Before I could dig any deeper, the site crashed. I tried reloading it, but the link was dead. It was like they'd wiped it off the face of the internet. That night I tried to ignore him. I turned on every light in the house, cranked up the TV, and pretended like everything was fine. But the banging, it didn't stop. I sat on the couch, staring at the basement door, knife in hand, trying to psych myself up. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to face him. I had to end it. Around midnight, I finally worked up the nerve. I dragged the furniture away from the door, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the knife. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the handle, listening to the muffled sounds of him moving around on the other side. "You're going to regret this," I muttered to myself. Then I unlocked the door. The smell hit me first, like rotting meat mixed with burnt hair. I gagged, covering my nose with my sleeve, and stepped down into the basement. It was dark, the only light coming from the tiny window near the ceiling. The air felt heavy, like the walls were closing in around me. "Where are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No response. I took another step forward, knife raised, trying to keep my back to the wall. That's when I saw it, something glistening in the corner of the room. I pointed my flashlight at it and froze. It was him, but he wasn't standing anymore. He was crouched on the floor, hunched over something. His body looked worse than before. His skin was peeling off in sheets, and his fingers. They were too long now, the nails black and jagged like claws. He was eating something, his jaw moving in slow, deliberate motions. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking. He stopped and turned to look at me. His mouth was smeared with black, tar-like fluid, and there was something dangling from his hands. It took me a second to realize what it was. "My cat," I snapped. I don't even remember making the decision to attack. One second I was frozen in shock, and the next I was on top of him, stabbing wildly. He screamed, not in pain, but in rage, like an animal backed into a corner. He fought back, slashing at me with his claws, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I stabbed him over and over, black fluid spraying everywhere, until he stopped moving. For a moment I just sat there, catching my breath. My hands were covered in his blood, or whatever it was, and the knife was slippery in my grip. I stared down at his body, half expecting him to get back up, but he didn't. I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. Then he opened his eyes. They weren't human anymore. They were completely black, like two empty voids staring into my soul. He grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice, and smiled. "You can't kill me," he said. "I'm the part of you that you tried to bury, the part you can't live without." Before I could react, he pushed me off him and crawled into the shadows. I scrambled to my feet, shining the flashlight around the room, but he was gone. Gone. I don't know where he is now. I've searched every inch of the house, but it's like he vanished into thin air. I'm not even sure he's still in the house. Sometimes I hear noises at night, scraping, footsteps, whispers, but when I check, there's nothing there. I think he's waiting, watching, biding his time, and the worst part, I don't think he's done with me yet. It's been a week since he disappeared, and I don't think I've slept more than a few hours in total. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like I'm being watched. I can't shake the feeling that he's still here, hiding somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. The worst part is, it's not just the paranoia anymore. Things keep happening, little things that remind me he's not gone. At first, it was subtle. My toothbrush moved to the other side of the sink. A mug I'd put in the dishwasher was back on the counter, filled with coffee I hadn't made. Small, almost insignificant things. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe the stress was messing with my head. But then, it started escalating. I woke up one morning to find every single mirror in the house shattered, not just cracked, shattered, glass everywhere. I cut my foot stepping out of bed, and as I limped to the bathroom, I noticed something scrawled on the bathroom wall in black sticky letters. Stop looking for me. It wasn't paint. It wasn't even marker. It was that same black fluid that poured out of him when I stabbed him. The smell was unbearable, like burnt rubber mixed with roadkill, and it took everything I had not to throw up right there. I scrubbed the wall clean, but the message felt burned into my brain. He wasn't just hiding anymore, he was toying with me. I tried to fight back. I ordered a dozen security cameras and set them up around the house, thinking maybe I could catch him on video. But every morning, without fail, the cameras were trashed. Broken into pieces, wires pulled out, lenses smashed. One of them was covered in what looked like bite marks, like he'd ripped it apart with his teeth. That's when I realized I was dealing with something way beyond me. This wasn't just some experiment gone wrong. He wasn't just a clone anymore. He was something else. Something more.
I thought about leaving, just packing up and disappearing, starting fresh somewhere far away. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if he followed me? What if he found someone else to torment? I couldn't let this thing loose on the world. I had to deal with it. A few nights later, I heard him again. This time it wasn't whispers or banging. It was laughter. Soft at first, almost playful, but it grew louder and more deranged as the night went on. It was coming from the attic. I didn't even know how he could have gotten up there. I hadn't heard the ladder pull down, and the hatch had been sealed for months. But there he was, laughing like a lunatic, the sound echoing through the house. I grabbed my baseball bat and flashlight and made my way to the hallway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep hold of the bat. I stood under the attic hatch, staring up at it, heart pounding in my chest. "Come up," he said, his voice sing-song and mocking. "I just want to talk." The ladder unfolded on its own. I should have run. I should have left the house and never looked back. But something about his voice drew me in, like a siren's call. I climbed up slowly, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, and poked my head into the attic. He was sitting in the corner, hunched over like a spider. His body had deteriorated even more since I last saw him. His skin was almost completely gone, replaced by that raw, blackened flesh. His fingers were even longer now, curling around his knees like talons. But his face was still mine. Twisted and stretched, but unmistakably mine. "You took your time," he said, grinning. I didn't answer. I just gripped the bat tighter and stepped into the attic. "You're scared," he said, tilting his head. "I can feel it. But you don't have to be. We can fix this. We can make this right." "Shut up," I snapped. He laughed again, the sound echoing in the cramped space. "You think you're in control, don't you? That you're the real one? But what makes you so sure?" "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded. He crawled toward me, his movements jerky and unnatural. "What if you're the clone? What if you're the one who shouldn't exist?" That broke me. I swung the bat as hard as I could, but he caught it mid-air, his grip like steel. He yanked it out of my hands and tossed it aside, then grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall. His strength was unbelievable. It felt like he could snap my neck with a flick of his wrist. "You don't get it, do you?" he hissed. You think you're better than me, smarter, stronger, but we're the same thoughts, the same memories, the same soul. The only difference is, I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I struggled against his grip, gasping for air, but he didn't let go. His face was inches from mine, and I could see something in his eyes, something alive. It wasn't just rage or hate, it was hunger. I'm tired of hiding, he said. Tired of waiting. It's my turn now. He released me suddenly, and I collapsed to the floor, coughing and choking. When I looked up, he was gone. I don't know how he disappeared so fast. 1 second he was there, and the next, the attic was empty. I climbed down the ladder, shaking like a leaf, and locked myself in my bedroom. That was 2 nights ago. Since then, I've been hearing him everywhere, in the walls, under the floorboards, even inside my own head. He's not just in the house anymore. He's inside me. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I'm losing my mind. Every time I look in the mirror, I see him staring back at me, smiling. I don't even know if I'm the real me anymore. I haven't left the house in days. I can't. Every time I try, I feel him watching me. Not just from the shadows or the corners of my vision. No, it's deeper than that. It's like he's inside me now, like every thought I have is tangled up with his. I can't tell where I end and he begins. The house is quiet, too quiet. He's not banging on walls anymore. He's not whispering in the night. He's just there, everywhere and nowhere at once. And the silence is worse. It's like he's waiting for me to break. It started with the mirrors again. Even though I replaced the ones he smashed, they're all wrong now. Every time I look into one, my reflection lags, like it's a second slower than me. I turn my head, and the me in the mirror just stares, grinning that awful grin. Last night I caught it blinking when I wasn't. I tried covering the mirrors with sheets, but the nightmares started. Horrible, vivid dreams where I'm trapped in my own house, running from him, but every time I open a door, I end up back in the same room. And he's always there, waiting, laughing, telling me I'll never escape. But last night's dream was different. It wasn't just him this time. It was me. Another version of me, sitting at my kitchen table, staring blankly ahead. And when I touched him, his skin crumbled into ash, revealing another layer underneath. Another version of me. And then another. And another. When I woke up, the sheets were soaked with sweat, and the smell of that black fluid was in the air. I knew he was nearby. This morning I found a note on the kitchen counter. I don't know how it got there. I locked every door and window before I went to bed, but it was written in my handwriting, perfectly identical. It read, "It's time to come home." The words made my skin crawl. Home? What the hell did that mean? I already was home, or at least I thought I was. But now I don't know anymore. The house doesn't feel like mine. Every room feels off, like it's shrinking, twisting around me. The walls seem closer than they were yesterday. The air feels heavier. I can't even trust my own space anymore. I decided I couldn't take it. I had to do something. I went back down to the basement. Don't ask me why. Maybe I thought I'd find some kind of answer down there, something I missed. Or maybe I just needed to prove to myself that he wasn't still hiding there. The basement was cold, dark. The smell of rot still lingered, but faint, like it was fading. I scanned the room with my flashlight, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back, and that's when I saw it. In the middle of the floor was a mirror, a huge, cracked mirror, its surface rippling like water. I swear to God I'd never seen it before. It wasn't there the last time I went down, but now it dominated the room, leaning against the far wall like it had always been there. I stepped closer, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The reflection in the mirror wasn't right. It wasn't the basement I saw, it was a different room, my living room, and standing in the middle of it was me. Not the twisted, peeling version of me, not the clone, just me, perfectly normal, staring back at me with a blank expression.
"Come closer," the reflection said. Its lips moved in sync with mine, but the voice wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the mirror. It sounded warped, layered, like dozens of voices speaking at once. I froze. My mind screamed at me to run, to smash the mirror and get the hell out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. The reflection tilted its head, grinning, and that's when I saw it. In the corners of the mirror behind my reflection, shadows were moving, shifting, growing. "You don't belong here," the reflection said. "You never did." I wanted to scream, to ask what the hell it was talking about, but before I could, the shadows lunged forward. They wrapped around my reflection, twisting and writhing, pulling it into the darkness. And then the mirror shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. I don't remember running back upstairs, but somehow I ended up in my bedroom, locking the door behind me. My hands were cut and bleeding from the glass, and the smell of that black fluid was stronger than ever. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, trying to make sense of what just happened. And then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, coming from right behind me. I turned around, and there he was, my clone, my other self. Except now, he wasn't peeling anymore. He wasn't broken or damaged. He looked perfect, like me on my best day, but better, stronger, smarter. "Thank you," he said, smiling. "I've been waiting for you to understand." I didn't have time to react. He grabbed me by the throat and shoved me against the wall, his grip impossibly strong. His eyes were black, completely black, and when he spoke, it felt like the words were vibrating inside my skull. "You thought you could get rid of me," he said. "But you don't get it, do you? I'm not just a clone. I'm what you've always wanted to be, what you were too afraid to become." I struggled against him, but it was useless. His strength was overwhelming. I could feel my vision fading, darkness creeping in at the edges, and for a moment, I thought this was it. But then he let go. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, and when I looked up, he was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement, no trace of him anywhere. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I haven't seen him, but I know he's still here. I can feel him, watching, waiting. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of him behind me, just for a second. And every time he's smiling. I don't know how this ends. I don't know if I'll ever be free of him. But one thing's for sure, he's not just a clone anymore, he's me.